On August 3rd, a press release on the website of TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, aroused many concerns around the world, as this company has finally been authorized to build facilities which are designed to release treated water from its obsolete nuclear power plant. But who approved their proposals? What are the problems and the possible consequences behind actually dumping those 1 million tons of radioactive water in the ocean? What are the other after effects if they really do so? Well, welcome to Facts Tell. I'm Sina. So, who nodded? There's certainly a bunch of documents that need to get approved just prior to publishing this press release we saw at the beginning. Most importantly are these two documents with super long names. I won't read them out. You guys can have a look for yourself. The first one, this application documents for approval was sent to NRA for permission. Oh, not NRA that promotes guns. This NRA is the Nuclear Regulation Authority, which is just an administrative body under Japan's cabinet. And the second document, request for prior consent, was submitted by TEPCO to Fukushima Prefecture, Okuma Town, and Futaba Town in December last year. And they all got passed. So that's why TEPCO happily published a press release and announced to the world that they are going to build discharge facilities, which enable them to pour radioactive water into the ocean starting next summer. But hold on a second. This is about 1 million tons of radioactive water dumped into the Pacific, and there are other countries and billions of people living around the area. So here is my question. Can one branch of Japan's cabinet or one prefecture and two towns decide the fate of billions of people? As a matter of fact, what did they really decide on? Do they have the authority to say yes? Many of you may already know that in 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake hit the northeastern coast of Japan. Although the backup systems managed to prevent a meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear plant after the initial quake, a later 15-meter tsunami knocked out a cooling system to the reactors, 3 of which failed. That's why we now have to deal with more than 1 million tons of contaminated water, which have been used to cool the melted reactors. Japan once said publicly that the ocean release was the most realistic option. Disposing water is needed, and they will make sure the water is safe. In fact, TEPCO drew up specific plans to treat this radioactive water at Daiichi power plant. According to the company, there are 3 steps involved in the process: purifying, diluting, and discharging. 3 steps undone, here's your perfectly safe water. But in reality, just as mysterious as the climate can be, nature is an even more complex object for us to fully understand. The chain of filters TEPCO used to run the water through during the phase of purification is called the Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS. It's a piece of multi-nuclide removal equipment with the ability to capture about 62 kinds of different radionuclides. However, not tritium and carbon-14.
You can get rid of the vast majority of these other elements, but tritium, chemically, it's really difficult to separate from water.
That's why TEPCO claims that it will remove almost all kinds of nuclides other than these 2 to the maximum extent. But they certainly won't leave them hanging there. So here comes the second step, dilution, which downgrades the tritium concentration level to 1/40th of what Japan allows in drinking water, and the level of carbon-14 down to 1/1000th of the standards. So far, so good. But nature is more than figures and sheets, hypotheses, or in-lab experiments. Although this plan seemed sound, it still got questioned by experts. In addition to tritium, there are more dangerous isotopes with much longer radioactive lifetimes, such as ruthenium, cobalt, strontium, and plutonium. They can sometimes slip through the ALPS process. And it's something TEPCO had to acknowledge back in 2018. And he said these additional nuclides were present in more than 70% of its tanks.
Many other isotopes are in those tanks still, and over 70% of the tanks would have to be cleaned up further before they might consider even releasing, because the tritium level itself might not be of concern, but these other isotopes are of concern.
Why are these other isotopes of great concern? Because no one can control the distribution of these dangerous ones once they get into the Pacific. How much would end up in marine life, causing biological concentration which goes up the food chain and ends up on our dinner tables? How much would end up in seafloor sediments? We have to bear in mind that these isotopes behave much differently than tritium in the ocean and can be more readily incorporated into marine biota or seafloor sediments. Those effects are what really got oceanographers worried. And that's why local residents, the fishing industry, environmental groups, and neighboring countries are at the forefront against Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge proposal. Fishing groups in Fukushima Prefecture have been strongly opposed, fearing it could further taint the reputation of their catch and affect their livelihoods.
The fishermen know that the perception of the danger of their fish could really significantly damage their industry, and I totally understand that. For example, in Fukushima area, sales of rice, which were below the Japanese regulatory limit, still got a value of about 20% less than the market value because of this perceived risk.
In fact, these fishermen have good reasons to worry, and not just about the perception of the danger. Radioactive rockfish have been caught off Fukushima Prefecture earlier this year, more than a decade after the nuclear disaster happened. And the radiation in this catch exceeded the safe level for humans by 14 times, indicating contamination still exists even after almost 11 years. On the other hand, there are still a dozen countries restricting imports of Japanese food from areas affected by Fukushima nuclear crisis. And neighboring countries like South Korea and China have expressed serious concerns repeatedly regarding the water dumping plan, asking Japan to act in a responsible manner. Environmental groups also expressed concern about high level of radioactivity detected in the rockfish. They also argue that the radioactive substance that contaminated water contains has this potential to damage human DNA. They have also been calling constantly on Japan's government to cancel its plan and stop releasing further radioactive water into the Pacific.
The abrupt decision to discharge decontaminated water into the sea shows complete disregard for public opinion and is unacceptable to most people in Fukushima.
Yet in order to proceed with the sea discharge plan, Japan certainly gained some support from the experts. One big argument they're using is that nuclear power plants the world over regularly release water containing trace amounts of tritium into the environment. This has preceding practices and it will be totally fine as long as it's conducted under monitored and controlled conditions. But the thing is this, these preceding practices refer to normally operated nuclear plants, not the ones like Chernobyl and Fukushima, which experienced serious reactor meltdowns. And you know what? People there want to believe the government, but they need solid evidence, not just some pep talk saying safety is top priority and let's face the reality.
There have been leaks of contaminated water before. If the discharge plan is feasible, convincing evidence must be presented.
Unfortunately, there isn't any convincing evidence so far. In neither the press release nor the attachment regarding the installation of dilution and discharge facility, there are no additional tank cleaning schedule and storage content details, which scientists urge to do to get rid of those dangerous isotopes before discharging into the sea. Scientists such as Shigeyushi Otosaka pointed out that there is a lack of scientific support, as the TEPCO purification has only been tested on a small scale and is yet to prove itself that the processing performance can be maintained for a long time with a large quantity. And what are we talking about here? More than 1 million tons of radioactive water. Yet still, one of the biggest yes came from the IAEA, in which Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi publicly welcomed Japan's announcement regarding how to dispose of the treated water, saying the IAEA will be there to support and review. But with all due respect, Mr. Grossi, you are dealing with TEPCO, not an industry model. It's a company that is notorious for hiding massive leaks and deliberately ignoring nuclear safety risks. For years, TEPCO has insisted that radioactive materials have been removed completely. Yet as pressure mounted due to scientists questioning and local fishermen opposing, it acknowledged in 2018 that treated water still contained detectable levels of radioactive particles. It lied once, and Japan won the bid for 2022 Summer Olympics. In 2013, frantic efforts to contain radioactive leaks at a wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant have been dealt another blow after its operator said about 300 tons of highly contaminated water had seeped out of the tanks. The leak with many radionuclides is the worst such incident since the 2011 meltdown. Yet TEPCO said it didn't know for how long it happened, how the water leaked out, or where it had leaked to. For the second time, it failed the people in Fukushima. What's even worse is that some of that early release before the reported leak was actually intentional, because TEPCO reportedly had to dump 3 million gallons of contaminated water with low levels of radiation into the Pacific to make room in its storage ponds for more heavily contaminated ones. So, hiding secrecy for the third time? A government-backed report published in 2012 on the Fukushima crisis pointed out that Japanese authorities and TEPCO ignored the risk of an atomic accident because they were bound by a myth of nuclear safety. More importantly, TEPCO lied. Went after the 2011 tsunami. It didn't say a word about a reactor problem. The company president even instructed officials during the 2011 disaster to avoid using the word meltdown. And 5 years later, in 2016, it finally acknowledged its delayed disclosure of the meltdowns at 3 reactors. This was a huge cover-up, and it apologized. So I'm sorry, I lost the count of how many times TEPCO failed people who lived there. In fact, according to a German NGO Greenpeace and its independent analysis, what the Japanese government had said about ocean discharge is also a lie. The Japanese government and TEPCO had constructed a series of myths to support their plan, including by 2022 there will be no further space for storage of the water. The water is apparently not contaminated, and the radioactive tritium is the only radionuclide and harmless. And there are no alternatives to discharging the water into the ocean. All these narratives have been created for both financial and political reasons. Not only is ocean discharge the cheapest option, it also helps the government create the impression that substantial progress is being made in the early decommissioning of the Fukushima Daiichi reactors. Yet despite this habit of lying and covering, the company still successfully pushed through its water dumping plan. And this is how the story always ends. Despite a global outcry, Japanese zaibutsu, or let's say plutocrats, always get what they want. In 2021, a tweet from the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, said he thanks Japan for its transparent efforts in its decision to dispose of the treated water. Not quite sure about the transparency, given the poor track record they have, the Japanese government and TEPCO certainly don't deserve a thank you note. And openly saying, I'm about to damage nature and the ocean, doesn't justify its action at all. The Pacific Ocean belongs to all the global citizens, and it's not Japan's own sewer. Not to mention the livelihoods of the people living there have been heavily crushed over a decade. So, no matter how he repeatedly invites U.S. officials and IAEA to comfort people, we know for sure that ocean discharge is not Japan's private matter. The issue cannot be decided unilaterally by Japan, and true transparency needs extensive and full participation of the international community, involving multiple countries. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you like our shows, remember to click like and subscribe. I'm Sina. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.